I've been waiting about 3 years to make this video. Not because I didn't want to talk about this stuff, but because for a long time, I've been watching a pattern take shape. A pattern that has since been acknowledged by developers, whispered about privately, and almost never talked about publicly in a way that actually explains to the gamer what's going on. So today, I want to talk about publishers, the good ones, the bad ones, and the ones that show up with a lot of money, a lot of leverage, and contracts that look appealing until you realize they are almost entirely designed to protect only one side of the deal, and just how many indie studios are falling into this trap. And before anyone gets defensive in the comments, I want to be clear right up front. This is not an anti-publisher video. This is an anti-corporate publisher video. I have a lot of indie developers in this community that watch me, so this is a PSA to them to protect yourself and understand the contracts that you're reading and potentially signing. There are genuinely great publishers out there. Publishers that respect developers, that understand the genres that they're working in, that don't try to own everything you create, and that actually help games succeed instead of just extracting as much money as humanly possible from them. The problem is that those publishers don't have infinite resources. They can't take on every project. They can't fund every promising indie team. They have to be selective, and honestly, that's a good thing. It's really what I want for something like a Steam marketplace. Selectivity, in my opinion, means standards. It means focus. It means projects actually get the attention they deserve from the people that the developers actually need to be talking to. Where things start to go wrong is when massive corporate publishers and these global conglomerates see that gap and they decide to fill it, not with better deals, but with deals that range from bad to downright predatory. And these deals are happening every single day. What's happening right now is that the indie space has proven itself, right? We have indie games that are no longer just passion projects that might, break even. They're winning awards, they're outselling AAA titles, and they're showing that small teams can out-innovate massive studios when given the chance. That success attracts attention, and not all of it being good attention. A lot of publishers have moved into the indie space looking for upside with minimal risk. The contracts start looking less and less like partnerships and almost like you could call it an insurance policy, where the developers will say yes to nearly all of the downsides and the publishers make sure they're protected no matter how things shake out. I look back to 2021 with Void Interactive and Ready or Not. Void Interactive split from their publisher Team 17 was not clean at all. There was clearly tension between publisher and developer, and then eventually Void Interactive had to fight Team 17. They went on to self-publish, and they're one of the biggest tactical shooters in the space. We've seen similar issues with Xfil, where Microprose signed on to be the publisher for Xfil right at launch. I remember getting emails as a creator, and I never heard another fucking thing from them. And as of 3 days ago, they've been removed as the publisher for the game. I wonder why. And speaking of Microprose, there are a lot of cases in this space that seem to be a bit more complicated than just a contract gone wrong, but I still want to talk about them in this video. On one hand, Microprose, they revived a legendary name and helped bring attention to really niche or hardcore projects that probably wouldn't exist without them. I want to just go on record and say Microprose has published some bangers. They just recently published Cleared Hot, that helicopter like Desert Strike, spiritual successor, and it's a really good fucking game. And I have no doubt that without Microprose's assistance on that game wouldn't have been as massive as it was for an indie studio, right? But when you look at the portfolio of Microprose and you start to notice a little bit of a pattern going on there. Games like Warfare 1944, which, as much as I'm not a fan of Blue Drake, they had signed a deal with Microprose, to which now Microprose basically absorbed and now owns Warfare 1944. We recently just saw this with Ground Branch. If you guys didn't know, and I haven't made a video on it yet, Ground Branch was acquired by Microprose in 2024. Blackfoot Studios, the original developers, sold the IP to Microprose, and it's eventually becoming part of a larger corporate structure. And as we've seen before, once that happens, all the priorities change. We saw it with Hell Let Loose being absorbed and now owned by Team 17. And the one pattern that I'm noticing with all of these deals is when you talk to the developers or the heads of the studios that have been pushing these passion projects forward for years, every single one of them says the exact same thing, that they'll never work with a publisher ever again. And I'd say you have to wonder why that is, but I think most people can read between the lines. John from Ground Branch posted in the Steam's community hub on November 19th. He basically says Blackfoot, his studio, is still a thing. There's just no team in place at the moment. He's working on some ideas, but if it does happen, I can assure you it won't have an early access or a publisher. Now that tells me, if you're reading between the lines, things didn't go well behind the scenes with Microprose. And having a foot in the door of this industry, I've heard whispers behind the scenes, private DMs shared with me, where people are unhappy with certain publisher relations, where they sign a deal thinking everything is going to be, incredible and the publishers are going to help, and then it just turns into a shit show. In a confusing announcement just a few weeks back, Tencent sells battalion maker Bulkhead to newly formed consortium backed by Team 17 owner. So the studio Bulkhead, which is currently working on War Dogs, was owned by Tencent. They got a new company together to buy the IPs back from Tencent, and they seem very, very excited about that fact. And I would love to be able to sit down with the CEO, Joe. I know Joe, I've spoken to him a lot in the past. I would love to sit down and actually have an open conversation. Obviously, with all of this stuff, everything is always tied up in NDAs and stuff. You can't talk about it publicly, so nobody really understands what's going on. I, myself, have firsthand experience going through this process, speaking to multiple publishers, hearing out offers, and seeing just how predatory some of these contracts can be. And like I said, I've been waiting 3 years to talk about it, and now we're going to talk about it. In 2022, we announced Transients to the world for the first time. Our trailer hit 250,000 views, give or take. Our wishlist numbers were skyrocketing, and a lot of people were excited about the prospect of a YouTuber-backed tactical FPS that actually looks like we were making really good progress after only 6 months. Let me tell you guys, we had publishers knocking at the door trying to get their foot in the door. And granted, at the time, we were a struggling studio. Like, I was struggling to pay the guys with money I was making from sponsorships. It was a struggle for the first 2 years of development. And I got to see firsthand what goes into talking to 3 different types of publishers. And we talked about the good ones at the beginning of this video, the ones that are very selective, the one that don't have all of the resources, but you can tell that they genuinely care about the product. And I do want to give a shout out to PlayStack. I can't talk about the inner workings of the offers and the testing and all of that stuff, but shout out to PlayStack, man. I still to this day wish we could have got something done with them, but they were being very selective about the games that they were pulling on. We were, I think, in Q1 or Q2 at the time, so they were already, working on signing other games, and it just didn't work out. But I could tell right from the beginning that those people genuinely care about the developers that they work with. They're a small team, but I would have loved to work with them because I feel like they actually care. We spoke to a few other studios like that as well, who are just very selective. They get, guys, 19,000 games a year launch on Steam. However many of those are actually out there looking for publisher deals. It's insane. And we understand, no publishers could take on everybody. We also understand that our situation was incredibly unique. We had all these wishlist numbers, we had all the eyes on, but we were also a first-time dev studio who hadn't made the mistakes that we needed to make to get to the point where we can ship a product and prove to companies that we can ship a product. It's a risk, right? And so for all of these different publishers, they have to sit down and calculate whether or not the risk is worth the upside. And for a new startup studio of a bunch of amateurs who don't really know what they're doing, I totally understand why some of those conversations went the way that they did. That being said, there are a few bigger publishers that reached out to us with offers that I couldn't fucking believe. Keep in mind, at the time, we were looking at funding to try to get another year to a year and a half's worth of development from our small ragtag team at a part-time / one person coming on full-time basis. We were looking for around $100,000 to $150,000. which is a lot of money when you actually think about how much money that is. When it comes to game development, that is like spitting in a fucking ocean. It's really not much at all. And the one offer we received from a major publisher that turned me off of having conversations with anybody was structured like this. For $100,000, we would have to give up 80% of our revenue. Keep in mind, this is after Steam's 30%. This is before taxes. 80% of our revenue would go to this publisher until they made their money back. That 80% to them would then drop to 70% until they doubled their money. Once that happens, it would then drop to a 60-40 until they tripled their money. And this was a real offer. And then once that happens, it would then go 50-50 in perpetuity forever. They would take 50% of our revenue. For $100,000 to $150,000 investment, that's what we were offered. But the thing is I know that there are a lot of deals going out in this space that are structured very, very similar to something like this. Maybe not an 80-70 to a 60, but you are seeing structured deals where it might go from a 70 to a 60 to a 50-50 split. And the offers for something like that, the upside for the publisher is insanity. It would take almost nothing for a game with any sort of like viewership or notoriety to make that money back. And for them only having to offer 100 to 150,000, keep in mind the spit in the ocean for what it costs to actually develop games nowadays. The upside for the publisher on that deal is absolutely incredible, right? That was the last offer that I ever fielded from a publisher, and we had publishers reaching out to us, and I just, after that, after going through the process with talking to these other publishers and, you know, one deal falls through here, you know, we're not really interested at this, getting really terrible percentage offers, and then getting that one at the end of it, I just said, this, man. It's not even worth discussing. And I've been sitting on that offer. I've been sitting on that fucking deal for years now, wanting to talk about it, but I wanted to wait until our game was done. I wanted to wait until it was out to where I can then start using this platform to tell indie developers one fucking thing. If you can help it, do not go to a publisher unless you absolutely need it. I was blessed to be in the position that I was, that I had a team that was willing to struggle in the trenches with me, and we were able to funnel the revenue from sponsorships and ad revenue. And I was in this position where we were making some pretty decent money to be able to fund that development. A lot of people aren't granted that opportunity, and I totally understand. I grinded to get here, and I was able to then leverage that into development. A lot of people aren't granted that same opportunity, but if you can help it, as an indie studio, whether you're solo, whatever, stay as independent as humanly possible and don't give in to these corporate cocksuckers who swing in trying to make as much money as possible off of your hard work, because there's a lot of them out there. But I really need you guys to start reading the fucking contracts. And you can look around the space right now, especially in the indie FPS space, and you can just see how many different publishers are out there clearly tacked on to make a dollar and aren't actually providing any sort of value outside of a small financial boost, which, don't get me wrong, is a great thing to bring in revenue to be able to continue development. But when you're signing deals that essentially sell your soul for a couple $100,000, you're feasting on scraps while they have all the upside, all of the leverage. And then we get into the deals where there's also like potential ownership opportunities where studios are selling IPs to the publishers, or publishers are just absorbing the IPs. It's a very weird space to be in. So I've been wanting to make this video and just say, protect your goddamn selves. Be smart about it. And look around the space and start noticing the same patterns that I am going through the development process for the last 3.5 years. There's a lot of sharks out here. And I'm urging people to just take a second look and see if there's any way you can scrape along so that you don't give these motherfuckers any more of your time, money, or soul. They haven't earned it, and they damn sure don't deserve it. My name is Big Fry, and I have to let you guys know GamerSupps is having their Christmas sale on right now. You get a free gift with every tub purchase, and the more tubs you buy, the more stuff you get. Use code BigFry for 10% off of your order. And if you're unsure what to pick up, they do offer free sample packs that you can go and grab right now. And if you want to support the channel directly, you can pick up a copy of Transients on Steam right now, or go over to the Patreon and support over there on a monthly basis. We're investing in community and indie developers in 2026, and I want to make more content like this to help aspiring indie developers navigate this space, and I hope you're along for the ride. My name is Big Fry, and I'll see you on the next one.